She never thought she'd end up at a place like this. The chandelier hanging from the ceiling probably cost more than her entire year's salary. Crystal glasses clinked everywhere she looked, and people in expensive suits talked about things she couldn't care less about. Real estate, stock markets, vacation homes in places she'd never even heard of. This wasn't her world, not even close. She was a librarian, a simple, quiet librarian who liked her books, her tea, and going home to her small apartment where nobody bothered her. That was her comfort zone. But her best friend from work had other plans. Her friend had practically begged her to come to this charity event at the town's fancy cultural center. "You need to get out more," her friend had said for the 100th time. "You can't just hide behind books forever. Come on, it'll be fun. Free food, nice music. Maybe you'll meet someone interesting." She'd finally given in just to stop the nagging. Now she was regretting it. The room was packed with people who seemed to know exactly where they belonged. They laughed loudly, shook hands confidently, and moved through the crowd like they owned the place. Meanwhile, she stood near the wall, holding a glass of sparkling water she didn't really want, trying to look like she had a reason to be there. Her past felt so far away from all of this. 8 years ago, her life had been completely different. Back then, music was everything to her. The piano was her voice, her escape, her entire world. She'd started playing when she was just 4 years old. By the time she was 10, people were calling her gifted. By 15, teachers said she could go to the best music schools in the country. But that dream died when she was 16. She tried not to think about that day. The audition that was supposed to change her life. The stage that suddenly felt too big. The judges staring at her with their notebooks and serious faces. Her hands had started shaking before she even touched the keys. Her heart pounded so hard she thought everyone could hear it. And then, in the middle of the most important performance of her life, she froze. She couldn't do it. The panic swallowed her whole. She'd run off that stage and never went back. After that, she put the piano behind her, locked it away like a painful memory she didn't want to face. She convinced herself it was okay. Not everyone gets to live their dream, right? Some people are meant for quieter lives, safer lives. Lives where you don't have to risk failing in front of everyone. So she became a librarian. It was peaceful work. She helped people find books, organized shelves, and enjoyed the silence. No pressure, no judgment, no stages. But standing, here tonight surrounded by all this wealth and confidence, she felt that old ache again, the one she'd been ignoring for years. Her friend was across the room laughing with a group of people she'd just met. That was the difference between them. Her friend could walk into any room and make it feel like home. Meanwhile, she was counting the minutes until she could politely leave. That's when she noticed him. He was impossible to miss, really. Tall, well-dressed, with the kind of smile that made people lean in when he talked. A small crowd had gathered around him, hanging on his every word. He was telling some story about a business deal he'd closed, gesturing dramatically with his hands. Everyone laughed at the right moments. She learned later that he was a real estate developer who'd recently moved to town. New money, someone whispered. Made his fortune buying old buildings and turning them into trendy apartments. He clearly enjoyed the attention his success brought him. The evening dragged on. She checked her phone twice, hoping for an excuse to leave early. Nothing. Then the host made an announcement. The grand piano sitting in the corner of the hall was available for anyone who wanted to play. It was a beautiful instrument, all polished black wood and perfect white keys. A few brave souls took turns playing, simple songs mostly, a classical piece here, a jazz tune there, nothing too impressive, but people clapped politely anyway. Then the real estate developer decided it was his turn. He walked up to the piano like he'd done it 1,000 times before. Cracked his knuckles for effect, gave the crowd a confident grin. Then he played something modern and flashy, hitting the keys hard to make sure everyone noticed. It wasn't particularly skilled, but it was loud and energetic, and people seemed to enjoy it. The applause was enthusiastic. He stood up and took an exaggerated bow, clearly pleased with himself. As he walked back to his group, he was riding high on the attention, She was ready to forget the whole thing and find her friend so they could finally leave. But then her friend spotted her from across the room and waved her over. Before she could shake her head no, her friend was already talking to the people in the developers group. "My friend here is really musical too," her friend said, trying to be helpful, trying to pull her into the conversation. Her stomach dropped. The developer turned around, still glowing from his performance. He looked her up and down quickly, the way people do when they're sizing someone up. His smile was friendly enough, but there was something dismissive in his eyes. "Oh yeah?" he said. "You play piano?" She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. That old panic was creeping back in. "She's just shy," her friend continued, not realizing she was making things worse. "But she's really good." The developer's smile widened. "Well, the piano's right there. Come on, show us what you've got." She shook her head quickly. "No, I don't really play anymore. It's been a long time." "Oh, come on," he said, his tone light but slightly mocking. "It's just for fun. Unless you can only manage Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star." A few people in the group laughed. Not mean laughter exactly. Just casual amusement. The kind of laugh that doesn't think it's hurting anyone. But it hurt. It brought back every feeling she'd been trying to bury for 8 years. The shame. The failure. The sense that she'd wasted her talent and disappointed everyone who'd believed in her. Her friend looked embarrassed. "You don't have to if you don't want to." The developer had already turned back to his conversation, the moment forgotten for him. Just a small joke at a party. Nothing serious. But something was happening inside her. Something she hadn't felt in a very long time. It wasn't just embarrassment anymore. It was something else. Something stronger. Anger, maybe. Or defiance. Or maybe it was 8 years of silence finally demanding to be heard. Her hands weren't trembling this time. Her heart was beating fast, but not from fear. Before she could talk herself out of it, she heard herself say, "Okay." Everyone looked at her, surprised. "Okay," she said again, louder this time. "I'll play." The developer turned back around, eyebrows raised, that amused smile still on his face. "Really? All right then. This should be interesting." She walked toward the piano, her legs moving on autopilot. The room continued its chatter. Most people weren't even paying attention. They'd seen enough amateur performances tonight. They had no idea what was about to happen. Neither did she. The walk to the piano felt like it took forever and no time at all. Each step echoed in her mind louder than it probably did in the actual room. People were still talking, glasses still clinking, the party continuing around her like she was invisible. Maybe that was better. Less pressure when nobody's really watching. She reached the piano bench and stood there for a moment, just staring at the keys. They looked almost too perfect, too pristine, like they were judging her before she even sat down. The last time she'd been this close to a piano in a public place, she'd run away in tears. "Don't think about that," she told herself. "Just don't think about it." She sat down slowly, adjusting the bench out of habit. Her hands hovered over the keys but didn't touch them yet. She could feel a few people glancing her way now, probably wondering why she was taking so long. The developer was back with his group, half paying attention, probably expecting this to be over quickly so they could move on to more interesting things. Her friend gave her an encouraging smile from across the room, though there was worry in her eyes too. She probably regretted putting her in this position. The thing was, nobody in this room knew her story. They didn't know that she'd spent 12 years of her childhood doing nothing but practice, 4 hours a day, sometimes more. Her parents had sacrificed so much to pay for lessons with the best teachers. Her instructor had called her a once-in-a-generation talent. She'd won competitions, performed in concerts. Everyone said she was going places, and then that one day, that one audition, destroyed it all. She'd spent 8 years trying to forget what it felt like to play. To really play. Not just pressing keys, but pouring everything you are into the music until you don't know where you end and the sound begins. She'd locked that part of herself away because it hurt too much to remember what she'd lost. But sitting here now, something was different. Maybe it was the way that man had laughed. Not cruelly, but casually. Like her playing wouldn't matter either way. Like she was just another person who thought they could play but really couldn't. Or maybe it was deeper than that. Maybe she was just tired. Tired of hiding. Tired of pretending that giving up her dream was okay. Tired of playing it safe in a quiet life that never challenged her. She took a breath. Then another. The room seemed louder now. Someone laughed at a joke. Ice cubes rattled in glasses. A phone buzzed somewhere nearby. Then she pressed a single key. Middle C. The most basic note on the piano. The first note every beginner learns. But the way she played it, it wasn't basic at all. She held it with perfect control, letting it ring out clear and pure. Not too loud, not too soft. Just right. The kind of note that makes you stop what you're doing, because something about it feels important. A few conversations nearby faltered. People's heads started to turn. She didn't notice. Her eyes were closed now, and something was happening inside her. Something she hadn't felt in almost a decade. The muscle memory was coming back. Her fingers remembered what her mind had tried to forget. What came next wasn't some simple song. It wasn't a crowd pleaser or a popular tune, it was Rachmaninoff. Piano Concerto No. 2. One of the most beautiful and technically brutal pieces ever written. The kind of piece that makes professional pianists nervous. The kind of piece that separates people who can play piano from people who can make a piano sing. Her fingers moved across the keys like they'd never stopped. Like the 8 years of silence had never happened. The notes cascaded and climbed, soft then powerful, gentle then thundering. Her whole body moved with the music, swaying slightly, lost in it completely. The room went silent, not gradually, all at once. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Glasses were set down carefully so they wouldn't make noise. People who'd been standing sat down. People who'd been walking froze where they were. Everyone was staring now. The developer's amused smile had vanished. His mouth was actually open slightly, his face going from confident to shocked to something else entirely. Embarrassment, maybe, or awe. Probably both. Her friend had tears streaming down her face, one hand covering her mouth. An older woman in an elegant dress near the front of the crowd was crying too, but smiling at the same time. She seemed to recognize something in the playing that others might miss. The music filled every corner of that massive hall. It poured out of the piano like it had been trapped inside, waiting for someone who knew how to set it free. Some parts were so soft you had to hold your breath to hear them. Other parts were so powerful they seemed to shake the floor. She wasn't just playing notes. She was telling a story without words. A story about loss and hope and pain and beauty all tangled together. About dreams that die and maybe, just maybe, come back to life. Her hands flew across the keys, executing runs and jumps that seemed impossible. Her fingers knew exactly where to go, exactly how much pressure to apply, exactly when to push and when to pull back. This was what she'd been born to do. This was who she really was underneath all the fear and hiding. Time disappeared. She had no idea if she'd been playing for 2 minutes or 20. All that existed was her and the piano and the music flowing between them. She reached the final passage. The last few notes hung in the air like they didn't want to leave. She held the final chord, letting it fade naturally until there was nothing left but silence. For a long moment nobody moved, nobody breathed. She opened her eyes, suddenly aware of where she was again. Her hands were shaking now, but not from fear. From adrenaline, from emotion, from the sheer release of letting out everything she'd kept bottled up for so long. Then the room exploded. The applause wasn't polite or obligatory, like it had been for the other players. It was thunderous. People were standing, shouting, clapping so hard their hands had to hurt. Some were wiping away tears. Others just stood there looking stunned, like they couldn't quite believe what they'd just witnessed. She sat frozen at the bench, overwhelmed. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. She'd just wanted to prove a point, maybe. To show that man he'd been wrong to dismiss her. She hadn't expected this. She hadn't expected to feel this. Her friend was pushing through the crowd, trying to reach her. The developer was standing completely still, his face red, looking like he wanted to disappear into the floor. But it was the older woman who reached her first. She moved quickly despite her age, her elegant dress swishing as she walked. When she got to the piano, she pulled her into a tight hug without saying a word. When she finally pulled back, the woman's eyes were searching her face. Really looking at her, like she was trying to remember something. "I know you," the woman said quietly, her voice shaking with emotion. "I remember you. The word sent a chill down her spine. She looked at the woman's face more carefully. There was something familiar about her, but she couldn't quite place it. "You were younger," the woman continued. "Just 16. You were supposed to play for us, but you ran away." And suddenly she knew exactly who this woman was. Her blood went cold. The applause around them faded into background noise. This was the woman from that audition, one of the judges. The one who'd been sitting in the center, watching her fall apart on stage 8 years ago. The moment she'd been running from had just caught up with her. She couldn't breathe. The room was still applauding. People were still moving toward her, but all she could see was this woman's face. This woman who'd been there on the worst day of her life. 8 years melted away in an instant. She was 16 again, standing on that stage, paralyzed with fear. She could almost feel the hot lights beating down on her. Hear the silence of the waiting audience. See the 3 judges sitting at their table with their pens and papers ready to score her performance. This woman had been the head judge, the director of the whole music program at the State Conservatory. She'd flown in specifically for that audition because they'd heard about the girl from the small town who played like she was possessed by the ghost of every great pianist who'd ever lived. And she'd watched that girl run off the stage in tears without playing a single note. "I've thought about you for years," the older woman said, her hand still gently holding her shoulders. "I've wondered what happened to you, where you went, if you ever played again." The applause was finally dying down. People were giving them space, sensing this was a private moment playing out in a very public place. Her friend stood a few feet away, looking confused but staying back. "I'm sorry," she heard herself whisper. It was the first thing she could think to say. "I'm so sorry about that day." The woman shook her head firmly. "No, don't apologize. Please don't apologize. But I wasted everyone's time. You came all that way and I just ran away like a coward." "You were a child under impossible pressure," the woman said, her voice kind but strong. "Do you know how many talented young people I've seen over the years? Hundreds, maybe thousands. And do you know what I've learned? Talent is common. Real extraordinary talent is rare, but it exists. What's truly rare is finding someone with both talent and the courage to use it." She didn't know what to say to that. Courage? She'd spent 8 years hiding in a library. The woman must have seen something in her expression because she smiled sadly. "You think running away means you're not brave? But you just did the bravest thing I've seen in years. You sat at that piano in front of all these strangers after all this time and you played. Really played. Do you understand how extraordinary that is?" Tears were starting to blur her vision. She tried to blink them away, but they kept coming. "That day," the woman continued, speaking quietly so only she could hear, "when you ran off that stage, I knew something was wrong. This wasn't just normal nerves. I wanted to go after you, but by the time we finished with the other auditions, you were gone. I called your teacher. I tried to reach your parents. Nobody would talk to me. It was like you'd disappeared." She remembered that time. Her parents had been devastated but trying to be supportive. Her teacher had been confused and hurt. Everyone had questions she couldn't answer because she didn't understand it herself. Why had she frozen? Why couldn't she just play? It wasn't logical. It wasn't fair. But Panic doesn't care about logic or fairness, so she'd shut everyone out, changed her phone number, stopped going to her lessons. Eventually, people stopped trying to reach her, and she'd convinced herself that was for the best. "I thought maybe you'd given up music completely," the woman said, "and that broke my heart because I knew what the world was losing. But hearing you play just now..." She paused, fresh tears in her eyes. "You haven't lost anything. If anything, you've grown. There's something in your playing now that wasn't there before. Pain, yes, but also depth. Understanding. It's like you've lived an entire lifetime since I last heard you." The room around them was still buzzing with energy. People were talking excitedly about the performance. She could hear fragments of conversation. "Where did she train? Why haven't we heard of her?" That was incredible. Her friend finally couldn't hold back anymore and rushed over, wrapping her in a hug. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked, pulling back to look at her face. "All this time you just said you used to play a little." "A little, that was... I don't even have words." She tried to smile, but it came out shaky. "It's complicated. Complicated." Her friend laughed, but it was a kind laugh. "That's the understatement of the century. Do you know what you just did? You made half the room cry. I saw the mayor crying. The mayor. Despite everything, she felt a small laugh bubble up. It was all so surreal. Then she saw the developer approaching. He looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. His confident swagger from earlier was completely gone. He stopped a respectful distance away, clearly uncomfortable. "I owe you an apology," he said simply. His voice was quieter than before, more genuine. "That was incredibly rude of me earlier. I made assumptions and I was wrong." Very wrong. She didn't know how to respond. Part of her wanted to be angry at him. His casual dismissal had hurt, had brought back all those feelings of worthlessness and failure. But looking at him now, seeing real remorse in his face, the anger wouldn't come. "You couldn't have known," she said finally. "That's not an excuse," he replied. "I shouldn't have made fun of you regardless of your skill level. That's on me. What you just did up there." He shook his head. "I've been to concert halls in major cities and never heard anything like that. You're the real deal." The older woman stepped in. "I'm sorry, I should introduce myself properly. I used to be the director of the state conservatory. I'm retired now, but I still teach privately, very selectively." She held out a business card. "I don't usually do this," the woman continued, "but I would like to work with you, if you're interested. No pressure, no auditions, no performances until you're ready. Just you, me, and the piano. Help you find your way back to this gift of yours." She stared at the card in her hand. It felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. "I don't know," she said honestly. "I don't know if I can do this. What if I freeze again? What if tonight was just, I don't know, a fluke? One good performance doesn't erase 8 years of being too scared to even look at a piano." "You're right," the woman said. "One performance doesn't erase 8 years. But it's a start. And that's all you need. A start. The rest comes one day at a time." Her friend squeezed her hand. "You don't have to decide anything right now. But for what it's worth, I think you should at least consider it. I've known you for 3 years and I've never seen you look as alive as you did while you were playing just now." Was that true? She tried to remember the last time she'd felt truly alive, truly herself. The library was comfortable, but it was also safe. Easy. Predictable. There were no risks, but there were no rewards either. Just the same quiet days, one after another. But when she was playing, when her fingers were dancing across those keys and the music was pouring out of her, she hadn't been thinking about safety or comfort. She'd been completely present. Completely free. The developer spoke up again. "Look, I know I'm probably the last person whose opinion matters here, but I agree with your friend. I spend my days renovating old buildings, right? Bringing them back to life. And the thing about old buildings is they're still structurally sound. The foundation is there. They just need someone to remember what they were meant to be." It was a surprisingly poetic thing for him to say. She looked at him with new eyes. Maybe she'd made assumptions about him too. The older woman put the business card directly in her hand, closing her fingers around it. "No pressure. Think about it. Call me if you want to talk. Even if you just want to discuss what happened tonight, or what happened 8 years ago. Sometimes talking helps." People were starting to approach again, wanting to congratulate her, ask her questions. It was overwhelming. "I need some air," she said suddenly. Her friend nodded immediately. "Come on, let's get you outside." They made their way through the crowd, people patting her shoulder and saying kind things she barely registered. She kept the business card clutched in her hand. The cool night air hit her face like a wave of relief. She hadn't realized how hot the room had gotten, or maybe that was just her. Her friend guided her to a bench near the building's entrance, away from the people still mingling inside. They sat in silence for a moment. The sounds of the party drifted out through the open doors behind them. Laughter, conversation, the clink of glasses. Normal sounds. But nothing felt normal anymore. "You okay?" her friend asked softly. She let out a long breath. "I don't know. I don't know what I am right now." That was intense in there. The woman, the music, all of it. "Yeah." She looked down at the business card still in her hand. The name embossed on it seemed to glow under the streetlight. A name that represented everything she'd run away from. I can't believe she remembered me. Of course she remembered you. After what I just saw, I'd remember you too. Her friend paused. "Why didn't you ever tell me? About your past, about how talented you are?" "Because I didn't want to talk about it. Didn't want to think about it. It felt easier to just pretend that part of my life never existed. But it did exist. And clearly it still exists. You can't fake what you just did in there." She knew her friend was right. The muscle memory had been there all along, waiting. The passion had been there too, buried under years of fear and shame. Playing tonight had been like opening a door she'd sealed shut, and now she couldn't close it again even if she wanted to. "I'm scared," she admitted. "What if I take her up on the offer and I freeze again? What if tonight was just adrenaline and anger and next time I sit at a piano I can't do it?" Her friend thought about this for a moment. "Then you freeze. And you try again. That's how things work, isn't it? Nobody gets it perfect every time. But what if I let her down? She's offering to teach me personally. That's huge. And I already disappointed her once." She doesn't seem disappointed. She seems excited. Like she just found something she thought was lost forever. Her friend smiled. "Look, I can't tell you what to do, but I can tell you that I've never seen you as happy as you were when you were playing. Not once in 3 years. You looked like you were finally yourself." Before she could respond, the door opened behind them. The developer stepped out, looking around until he spotted them. He seemed hesitant, like he wasn't sure if he should interrupt. "Sorry," he said. "I don't mean to bother you. I just wanted to make sure you were all right." "I'm fine," she said automatically. Then more honestly, "I'm overwhelmed." He nodded. "I bet. Listen, can I sit for a minute?" She gestured to the bench and he sat down, keeping a respectful distance. For a moment, none of them spoke. "I need to explain something," he finally said. "About earlier. Why I was such a jerk." "You already apologized," she said. "It's fine. It's not fine. And I don't think you understand why I acted that way." He looked uncomfortable but continued. "My whole life I've been trying to prove something. My father never thought I'd amount to anything. Said I wasn't smart enough, wasn't focused enough, wasn't good enough. So I spent every day working to show him he was wrong. Made money, bought properties, built a name for myself." She looked at him, surprised by the honesty. "And somewhere along the way," he continued, "I became the kind of person who looks down on others, who assumes they're better. Because if I'm not better than someone, then what was all that struggle for, right?" He shook his head. "But watching you play tonight, seeing real talent, real passion, something genuine, it reminded me how small I actually am, how much I'm still pretending." "We're all pretending something," her friend said quietly. "Maybe. But some pretending is worse than others." He turned to look directly at her. "What you have is real. Don't waste it because of fear. I've wasted enough of my life trying to impress people who don't matter. Don't make the same mistake." It was strange getting life advice from someone who'd insulted her just a couple hours ago, but there was something genuine in his words now, something raw and honest that hadn't been there before. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Sure. Do you actually like what you do? The real estate, all of it?" He was quiet for a long time. "I'm good at it. It makes money. People respect me for it." "That's not what I asked." He smiled sadly. No, I don't think I do. But I've been doing it so long I don't know what else I'd do." "Maybe that's worse," she said. "Spending your whole life doing something you don't love because you're afraid to try something else. Maybe you're right." He stood up. "I should let you two talk. But seriously, think about what that woman offered you. Some people spend their whole lives looking for their purpose. You already know yours. That's rare." He walked back inside, leaving them alone again. Her friend nudged her shoulder. "He's not wrong, you know." "I know." She stared at the business card again. "But it's terrifying. What if I'm not as good as everyone thinks? What if tonight was a one-time thing? And what if it wasn't? What if this is your chance to get back what you lost?" The door opened again. This time it was the older woman. She didn't approach right away, just stood near the entrance, giving them space. "I don't want to intrude," the woman called out. "I'm about to leave and I just wanted to say goodnight." She stood up before she could overthink it. "Wait, can I ask you something?" The woman walked over. "Of course, and that day at the audition. Did you think I was weak? For running away?" The woman's expression softened. "Not even for a second. I thought you were young and overwhelmed and dealing with something none of us understood. And I thought it was a terrible shame that the pressure of that moment robbed the world of hearing you play. But I had everything. The scholarship was practically guaranteed. Teachers said I was special. And I threw it all away. You didn't throw anything away. You took 8 years to heal from something that hurt you. That's not weakness. That's survival." The woman paused. "I've taught hundreds of students. Want to know what I've learned? The ones who matter, the ones who make real art, they're always the ones who've struggled, who've faced something hard and come out the other side. Technique you can teach, emotional depth, That comes from living, from hurting, from finding your way back. Tears were threatening again. She wiped them away quickly. What you played tonight wasn't just notes, the woman continued. It was 8 years of pain and growth and silence finally finding a voice. That's what made it special. That's what made everyone in that room stop breathing. I don't know if I can do it again. Maybe not tomorrow. Maybe not next week. But eventually? Yes, I believe you can. More importantly, after tonight, I think part of you believes it too. The woman handed her another card. That's my personal number. Not the business one. Call me when you're ready. Even if it's 3 in the morning and you just want to talk about what you're feeling. I mean that. She took the card with shaking hands. The woman smiled. I've been waiting 8 years to hear you play again. I can wait a little longer. She started to walk away, then turned back. But don't wait too long. Life's too short to hide from the things that make us feel alive. Then she was gone, disappearing into the night. Her friend put an arm around her shoulders. So, what are you going to do? She looked at both cards in her hand. 2 chances. 2 possibilities. 2 versions of what her life could become. I don't know yet, she said honestly, but I think I need to figure it out. They sat there together as the party wound down inside, the night growing darker around them. The future suddenly full of questions she couldn't answer yet. But for the first time in 8 years, those questions didn't terrify her. They felt like possibilities. 3 days passed before she touched the business card again. It sat on her kitchen counter watching her every morning while she made coffee, every evening when she came home from the library. Accusing her, challenging her, calling to her. She'd gone back to work like nothing had happened. But everything had happened. Her coworkers had heard about the charity event through the small-town gossip chain. They looked at her differently now. With curiosity, with questions in their eyes they were too polite to ask out loud. Her friend had been texting her every day. Have you called her yet? What are you waiting for? Don't overthink this. But overthinking was what she did best. On the 4th day, she walked past a music store on her lunch break. She never walked down that street anymore, always took the long way to avoid it. But today her feet carried her there anyway, like they had a mind of their own. There was a keyboard in the window. Nothing fancy, just a simple digital piano. Her reflection stared back at her in the glass, and behind it, those black and white keys that used to be her whole world. She went inside before she could stop herself. The store was quiet, just soft classical music playing from speakers somewhere. An elderly man behind the counter looked up and smiled. Help you find something? He asked. Can I try the keyboard in the window? Course you can. Let me plug it in for you. She sat on the small bench while he connected everything. Her hands hovered over the keys, trembling slightly. What if she couldn't do it? What if the magic from that night was already gone? She pressed one key, then another. Then her fingers started moving on their own, playing a simple melody from her childhood. Nothing fancy. Just something her first teacher had taught her when she was 5 years old. It sounded beautiful, not because the keyboard was expensive or high quality, not because the acoustics in the store were perfect, but because it was her playing again, after spending days wondering if she'd ever have the courage. The old man listened quietly from his counter, not interrupting, just letting her play. When she stopped, he spoke softly. You play like someone who's been missing it. I have been. For a long time. Well, you're always welcome to come in and play. No need to buy anything. Sometimes people just need to remember who they are. She thanked him and left, but something had shifted inside her. A decision was forming slowly, like ice melting into water. That evening, she finally picked up the business card. Stared at the phone number. Took a deep breath and called. The older woman answered on the second ring. Hello? Hi, it's me. From the charity event. I don't know if you remember. Of course I remember. I've been hoping you'd call. I want to do it. The lessons. If the offer's still open, the offer will always be open for you. There was such warmth in her voice. When would you like to start? Is tomorrow too soon? The woman laughed. Tomorrow is perfect. They made arrangements. The woman's home studio, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. 1 hour to start. No pressure. No expectations. Just her and the piano. She barely slept that night. The next day at work dragged on forever. She kept watching the clock, counting down the minutes. Her friend noticed and grinned. You called her, didn't you? I have my first lesson today. Her friend squealed and hugged her right there in the middle of the library, earning them both a few irritated looks from people trying to read. "I'm so proud of you," her friend whispered. "This is huge." "I'm terrified." "Good, that means it matters." At 2:30, she left work early and drove to the address on the card. It was a beautiful old house on the edge of town, with a garden out front and wind chimes singing on the porch, the kind of place that felt like it had stories in every corner. The woman answered the door before she even knocked, like she'd been watching for her. Come in, come in. Can I get you some tea?" "I'm okay, thank you. I'm just nervous, that's perfectly normal. Come, let me show you the studio." She led her through the house to a large room at the back, and there it was, a grand piano, glossy black, positioned near a window that looked out on the garden. Afternoon sunlight streamed across the keys. "It's beautiful," she breathed. "It's yours to play whenever you want." "I don't give many lessons these days, so it sits silent more than it should. It'll be nice to hear it come alive again." She walked over to it slowly, running her fingers along the smooth surface. "I don't know where to start." "Start by sitting down. Then start by playing whatever you feel like playing. There's no test here, no judges, just you and me and the music." She sat on the bench, adjusting it the same way she had at the charity event, the same way she'd done thousands of times as a child. Some things your body never forgets. She started with something simple, a piece she'd loved as a teenager. Her fingers were stiff at first, uncertain, but gradually they remembered. The music started to flow. The woman listened without interrupting, sitting in a chair near the window. When she finished, the woman smiled. "Beautiful. Now tell me, how did that feel?" "Scary, but also right." "Good. That's exactly how it should feel." The woman stood and came over to the piano. "Now I'm going to work with you on breathing. Did you know that most of your tension comes from forgetting to breathe while you play?" They spent the next hour working on technique, on posture, on letting the music breathe. But more than that, they talked about the pressure she'd felt as a child, about the expectations that had crushed her, about learning to play for herself instead of for judges or audiences or anyone else. "Music isn't a performance," the woman said at one point. "It's a conversation. Between you and the composer. Between you and the instrument. Between you and whoever's listening. But it starts with you. If you're not honest when you play, no amount of technical skill will make it meaningful." By the time the lesson ended, her hands ached and her mind was buzzing with new ideas, but she felt lighter somehow, like she'd been carrying a weight she didn't even know was there, and someone had finally helped her set it down. "Same time next week?" the woman asked. "Yes. Definitely yes." Over the next few months, something amazing happened. She didn't become famous overnight. There was no sudden transformation. But slowly, steadily, she started to reclaim the part of herself she'd lost. She played every day. Sometimes at the woman's house, sometimes at the music store where the old man always welcomed her. Sometimes late at night in her apartment on the cheap keyboard she'd finally bought for herself. Her friend came to her informal practice sessions, bringing coffee and encouragement. The developer, surprisingly, became a friend too. He'd started taking guitar lessons, trying to find his own creative outlet. They'd compare notes about learning music as adults, about facing fears, about starting over. And then came the invitation. The cultural center was hosting another charity event. They wanted her to perform. A real performance this time, advertised and planned. Her name on the poster. She stared at the invitation for a long time. Her teacher didn't push. "It's your choice. You don't have to perform for anyone if you don't want to." But that was the thing. She did want to. Not to prove anything to anyone else this time, but to prove something to herself, so she said yes. The night of the performance, she stood backstage, listening to the crowd gathering in the hall. Her hands were shaking. Her heart was racing. All the old fears came rushing back, but this time was different. This time her friend was in the front row. Her teacher was there too, smiling encouragement. The developer had bought a whole table of tickets and brought friends. The old man from the music store had closed his shop to come watch. This time she wasn't alone. She walked onto the stage. The lights were bright. The audience was watching. And for just a moment she was 16 again, frozen with fear. Then she remembered what her teacher had told her. "Music is a conversation. Start with yourself." She sat at the piano, closed her eyes, took a breath and pressed that same key. Middle C, clear and pure and perfect, then she played. Not for the judges who weren't there. Not for the childhood dreams that had died. Not even for the people watching, she played for herself. For the girl who'd run away 8 years ago. And the woman who'd finally found the courage to come back. For every silent year and every note she'd been too afraid to play. The music poured out of her like a river that had finally found its path. When she finished, the applause was thunderous. But what mattered more was the feeling in her chest. Peace, joy, freedom. She'd spent 8 years running from the thing that scared her most. And in the end, the only way past the fear was through it. She stood and bowed, tears streaming down her face. But these were different tears than the ones she'd cried at 16. These were tears of coming home.